Ombudsman. I'll be your facilitator today. I'm part of your planning committee, and I will turn it on over to one of my colleagues who is also on the planning committee, Teresa. Nice to see you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see everyone. Teresa Anderson with the California Policy Center for Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. Super happy to see everyone and what a good group we have, like you said, even right before the holidays. So I will kick it over to Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark Starford from Board Resource Center, one of the planning committee participants, and I'm really glad to be here and to see a really great group today. And next, Amy.
Can you hear me?
Oh, now we
Yes.
can.
Okay, sorry. I'm Amy, and I'm an ILS instructor or worker coordinator for the Arc of Butte County. And I also do have a son who's autistic and disabled. So I just saw this pop up in my email and I wanted to check it out.
Well, great. Glad you're here.
Welcome.
Take my baby.
Then maybe I'll turn it to you, Priscilla. I see you're on the screen.
Hi friends, I'm Priscilla Clausen. I use she, her pronouns. I am a project coordinator at Valor, and we are the state's anti-sexual violence coalition. And I'm going to be talking to you a little bit later about one of our projects, CA Leads, that some of you are already familiar with, but I'll fill the rest of you in.
Do you want to pick somebody or?
Yeah, let's see. Michelle?
Or hi everybody, it's first time I've been to your meeting, so I appreciate you having this space. I learned about it, I think, through an ARC email. My name's Michelle Mashburn. I'm the founder of All Things Disability Equity. I'm in Santa Clara County. I'm a disabled person that is advocating to remove ableism from the systems and structures that exist. So nice to be here. Go to Greg.
I'm Greg DeGier. I'm the civil rights advocate of the Arc of California, and my disability is attention deficit disorder. Astrid.
Still trying to figure out how to get off mute in all these years of Zoom. Astrid Zuniga, parent advocate and president of United Domestic Workers, and I'll be sharing some of the stuff that I've been up to here shortly. So happy to be here and happy to see you all. I will hand it over to Tyler.
Hi, all. Tyler Hershey with the Arc of California. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. Julie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Sherman. I'm Director of Public Policy for the Arc of California. I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit later about some legislative updates, but excited to be here and excited to meet you all. Oh, I'm sorry. I was supposed to choose someone. I wasn't paying enough attention to know. So if if the next person who hasn't spoken would like to go, please take the floor.
Perfect. I started to realize as the group grows, that might not work as easily. So maybe I'll start calling Jason. Nice to see you. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Hey everybody, nice to see you, Eden. I'm Jason Sullivan Halpern. I'm the director of the California Long-Term Care Ombudsman Association, and we represent the local long-term care ombudsman programs in California.
Perfect. And then Jay Armstead.
Hi everyone, I am Jay, he, him pronouns. I am the Disabilities Grant Program Coordinator with Weave in Sacramento.
Great. And how about Ricky Hammett?
Hello, Ricky Hammett. I'm the Assistant Director of Grants Management at the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. First time I've attended this meeting, so nice to be here and learn more about this.
Fantastic to have you.
Yes.
Let's see. I'm actually losing track. Andrea Schultz.
Hi, this is my first meeting as well. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in Fresno, California, and have family members and loved ones with special needs, and just interested in learning more policy macro issues going on here in California. Thanks.
Great. How about Ruth Kim?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry, I'm having some camera issues. But this is also my first meeting. I am from the Department of Developmental Services with the Risk Management Branch.
Alyssa Avila?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Also, my first meeting. My name's Alyssa, and I'm a disability justice advocate and currently in the process of applying to law school with the focus on disability rights and policy.
Welcome.
Awesome.
Felisa, how are you?
Hi,
Hi,
good
nice to
afternoon.
hear you.
I'm going to join like two different ways. So I'll do a quick introduction. I'm Felisa Gray, Deputy Director at Merced County Adult and Aging Services.
Welcome. Nice to see you again. Okay, I'm gonna do a quick check here. Is it Praxitas? Gracida, are you here? Maybe not yet. And then Jennifer, I'm not sure. Have you introduced yourself yet?
I haven't. I'm
Okay.
Jennifer Minahan. I am with the California Policy Center, along with Teresa Anderson and Dave Manson.
Perfect. Oh, yes, I did see Dave. Everybody keeps jumping, so it's difficult to keep track. I'll come up with a better way. We'll come up with a better way. Dave, you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. A pleasure to meet everyone here and grateful for the role that each of you play in the IDD community. I'm Dave Manson with the California Policy Center for IDD, our Director of Outreach and Engagement, and I'm always happy to be a part of these conversations where you shine an important spotlight on some really crucial issues.
Excellent. And then is it Nicola Rain? Am I close?
I think it's Nicole Renee, and they.
Oh, is that what it is? It's just
That's what
all
it looks like to
okay.
me. Is it Nicole
Okay.
Renee? They introduced
Well,
themselves.
I'm glad that you're here, Priscilla. Sorry about that.
Yeah, they introduced themselves in the chat, and
Oh.
said they're the Home and Community-Based Services peer mentor at the Bakersfield ARC.
Got it. Welcome. Okay. Anybody else before I? Oh, there you go. Hi.
I'm Marika Melman. I'm with the California Commission on Aging, and I'm the Outreach and Engagement Analyst.
Wonderful. Okay. Okay. Well, there's a lot of new people here, and I'm glad we did do a round of introductions. So, welcome. Today will be a good meeting because not only do we have a packed agenda, but we do have some time to maybe plan for next year, and it would be great to hear more about why you're here and what you're looking forward to learning and, getting from this group. So, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you, Astrid, and let us know a little bit about, I believe it's going to be SB 882 and the Manny Act. Have I got that right? Okay.
Yes. I'm going to try and share. We're going to see how this goes. Because everything, sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Let me go ahead and get it going. All right. So, super excited to be here with you all to share a little bit about the Manny Alert Act that we were able to get passed in 2019. And a little bit about what the SB 882 Advisory Council is doing and some of our preliminary draft recommendations that we're working on. So first, I'll touch bases on the Manny Alert Act. So that was a bill that my partner in crime, Ms. Teresa Anderson, worked with me on, as well as SB 882. Which was AB 911, which was carried by Assemblymember Rodriguez in 2019. And it was created because my son Manny, who, as I said before, I'm a parent advocate, is at the severe end of the autism spectrum with intellectual disabilities and epilepsy. And so made it my life's mission to pass legislation that addresses interactions between law enforcement and people with disabilities. And with him being a runner, he's gotten out of my yard a few times because one of my 11 grandkids will uh, leave a gate unlocked sometimes, so to speak. So I just, there's things as a parent that go through your mind, and I've looked at this as a patchwork quilt, and this is one of the 6 bills that I have been able to successfully work on and champion to address these interactions. So as you see here, the purpose and scope of the act was to enhance emergency responses for people with cognitive and developmental disabilities by providing vital health information in advance of a 911 emergency. Truthfully, the system is for all Californians, but naturally my concern is seniors and people with disabilities. So it was housed and to be managed under the California Office of Emergency Services to manage and maintain a system that would enable voluntary data sharing to assist first responders during a 911 call. The feasibility study, the act mandated that a study on the technical, operational, and financial viability, including integration with existing emergency infrastructures, be done. And the findings of the feasibility study were reported to the legislature in 2021. The advisory board voted on it and approved it, and it was sent over to the legislature to guide implementation discussions. Unfortunately, we were in the midst of a pandemic and a governor's recall, and so that got put on the back burner, to say the least. So a little bit about the feasibility study findings. So the statewide registration database system can securely collect and integrate citizen data into existing 911 workflows using their current CAD system. And this is the system that the dispatchers use and is housed under the dispatchers throughout Cal OES. It can be integrated with their plans for the next gen 911, which is something they were working on to set up for text to 911 capabilities and things of that sort. And it would allow, existing call processing equipment. It would be feasible for data as long as the data is accurate, concise, timely, and secure. And that was a piece of the legislation that, when we worked to get it passed, was very much heard that it has to be encrypted, it has to be secure, and it has to be voluntary to avoid HIPAA laws. So the maintaining some of the challenges that were brought up during the advisory committee hearing was maintaining the data integrity and workflow without overwhelming dispatchers, as well as low adoption rates. And they highlighted the need for effective public engagement and addressing liability and update challenges. For me, I feel like that's a little bit of a cop-out, but that's me as a parent, right? And I just feel we get notifications for a numerous amount of things reminding us to update our profiles or our payments and things of that sort. And if you put a parent like myself out there on their PR train, I'll make sure that people are well aware of it. So I tend to be a bit of a workhorse when it comes to this. So financial side, because it's always about money. Unfortunately, when it comes to anything, any service that that our loved ones rely on, it's always attached to money. Now, mind you, these numbers were from back in 2021, so they might be a little bit different now. But as you see here, they estimated the total annual cost to sustain this to be $116 million annually to sustain. And that's broken down into updating systems and databases, staffing, things of that sort. However, none of this would have to touch general fund dollars. So that was a really key piece I felt was important for folks to know is there's a few different options here that, for funding and implementation of a statewide self-registration database. One of which I think is probably the most important, most useful one, which was the 911 surcharge funds. Per previous legislation, there was a bill that was passed, and all of us pay a surcharge on our cell phone bills for 911 services. And currently it's at about 34 cents. And through that previous legislation, it would be able to go up to 80 cents as long as the administration just approved, the plan and the reason for the increase in the surcharge. And so through all of this, I discovered that 1 penny increase to our cell phone bills would generate about $7 million. And this was in 2021. So you can imagine there's a ton more phones out there. And so being able to do that with a 4-year plan is what they presented when they came up with this feasibility study. Over 4 years, our cell phone bills would go up about 15 cents to sustain a program of this magnitude that would, allow for ourselves and our loved ones to provide vital health information in events of a 911 emergency, and first responders to know what they're walking into in advance. So I just felt like that was probably the most feasible and simple way, but there's other options, right? As it says here, Mental Health Services Act funds, targeted grants, especially for, most of our rural areas, especially the law enforcement agencies that don't have a lot of resources. So that would be an opportunity to also tap into public and private partnerships, and then a cloud-based CAD solution. So all of these are opportunities for funding. Myself personally, I just felt the surcharge fund, it was probably the easiest way to get this moving and get it passed. We are still in the waiting period for this, but as we move into my next thing I'll be talking about, which is the SB 882 Advisory Council and their draft recommendations. So SB 882 was a bill that Senator Eggman carried for us in 2023. And that created the statewide advisory council for improving interactions between law enforcement and people with disabilities. Excuse me. And so, again, Teresa, when she was at the ARC and was my partner in crime and pushing to get this implemented, we were successful in getting it passed in 2023. And last year, the end of 2023, I was appointed by the governor to sit on this advisory council. I currently serve as the vice chair, along with a bunch of other stakeholders and self-advocates and experts in their field, law enforcement. It's a really great group of people that really, this is something they're all very passionate about. And so we've been busy. Purpose, as I said, was to establish the advisory council to improve those interactions. The council includes individuals with disability, law enforcement, advocacy organizations, self-advocates to represent all of the key stakeholders. The council reviews peace officer trainings, engages the stakeholders, and recommends improvement for better interactions. This initiative reflects a commitment to public safety and equity through informed policy and training reforms. So some of the things we've been doing, recent meetings have focused on improving the training, as well as many of our council members have attended the different trainings throughout the state. There is hundreds of trainings throughout the state, some virtual, some in person. And so we've been able to attend these trainings and then be the little fly on the wall to provide feedback on each of them. The council's also engaged with many subject matter experts for CIT trainings, the different types of trainings throughout the state and the experts that provide that. Many self-advocates were actually with us just this past earlier this month on the 10th, and their families helped provide information. They're part of trainings in the LA area. And so that it was really good to see all of that. Some technology integration. We'll be drafting recommendations, emphasizing things like the Manny Eller Act to enhance the communications between law enforcement, first responders, and our communities, and enhance those training modules. And then last but not least, we will be finalizing a report with guidance to the legislature on actions to strengthen our public safety. And that will be completed by April of 2026. Recently, we created some subcommittees. So the advisory council is under the DOJ, and we have had amazing staff who have helped formulate and put together a rough draft of a report. And the council felt that these would be the subcommittees that we would break up into and appoint a couple of folks to in order to really just narrow down some key recommendations around background, community engagement, best practices, data, training, of course, and system interventions. So this was some of the preliminary recommendations we had earlier this month. Enhancing care coordination, right? Recommendations focusing on improving collaboration between health, behavioral, and emergency response agencies and in timely manner. Incorporating person-centered planning. Principles from the Latterman Act, promoting individualized lifelong access to services, along with regional coordination for people with disabilities, and building integrated systems. Embedding coordinated approaches into policy, enhancing system integration, reducing care gaps, because we found that there's a whole lot of gaps, and I'm sure everybody in this meeting understands that, and improves, the safety and well-being of some of our communities, disabled, senior, and just Californians as a whole. Other one, community engagement. Some regular non-emergency interactions, right? Creating programs that enable law enforcement to engage regularly with individuals with disabilities through visits and community events. Integrating safe interaction skills into the K through 12 curriculum and IEP programs for continuity across the environments. Nonverbal crisis communication, developing and educating on nonverbal signals for crises between individuals and officers to enhance the safety. These are just kind of wish lists, things that we were throwing out there. We're going to narrow them and dig into them some more in a few weeks, but training and resource support, providing training and resources to families, dispatchers, security personnel, all to reduce unnecessary emergency interventions. Some of the best practices that we have found through some of these meetings that we've had and presentations. There's some self-paced online training, which can promote accessible self-paced training modules with interactive exams to enhance engagement and learning outcomes. And this came up a lot with rural agencies because they have less staff that can be just released for a longer period of time to attend in-person training. So this was a module that has been used successfully. I am a big proponent of more hands-on in-person, but this has been a successful model. So immersive and micro learning, use of virtual reality for immersive learning and micro learning, much like the online stuff, like analyzing body cam footage for real case scenario reviews. Inclusive identification systems, implementing voluntary ID systems like the blue envelope, lanyards, different types of and having it all translated into multiple languages, even Braille, things were popping into our head. Like it's just one disability, it's not the same across the board. And there's multiple, some people could have multiple diagnoses. And so taking that into account as well. Integrated calls for service with officer-initiated stops to provide context and reduce misunderstanding during interactions. Some data recommendations, because this was also a big piece, because there's not a whole lot of data out there. And so in order for us to make these decisions and make these recommendations, we need more data. An ongoing program assessment of proposed pilot projects evaluated by researchers to assess, whoops, I went too far. Let me see if I can go back. There we go. To assess reforms, effectiveness, and continuously. Priority success markers, identifying key indicators like reduced injuries, increased supportive services, connections, and fewer internal complaints. Data accuracy. This is a big one. And validation. Emphasize rigorous testing and validation of data collected to ensure accuracy and officer disability perceptions, and a centralized data repository. Advocating for a centralized repository in a public health agency to consolidate and analyze reform data effectively. Training. It's always a big one. No matter what side of the spectrum you're on, if it's less or more in person, virtually. However, we've noticed over the years, and since we passed the bill in 2015 with Senator Bell for mandation of training, we've discovered there's always some gaps that need to be filled, and there's always room for improvement. So some guiding principles focus on reducing use of force naturally and building community trust in training approaches. Technology enhanced training, as I said earlier, utilizing virtual reality, mobile training units, body cam platforms for realistic scenario trainings. Establish a hub with policies, modules, resources for law enforcement and community partners. Evaluation and policy reforms that track training outcomes and integrate mental health and intellectual and developmental disabilities into standards with academic partnerships and funding. System interventions. Strengthening collaboration between law enforcement, regional centers, behavioral health departments for effective responses. Implementing safety training for behavioral health individuals and dispatch personnel to improve emergency interactions. Focusing on resolving workforce shortages in law enforcement and in behavioral health and statewide crisis bed deficits. A lot of gaps we've uncovered in all of this over the last year or so. And proposed grants, because funding and policy initiatives is what it's all going to boil down to. Utilizing the surcharge funds I spoke of earlier and developing model agreements to support systemic improvements. And so some of our next steps are creating this holistic emergency framework, implementing things like the Manning Alert, many of the SB 882 initiatives to create a comprehensive emergency response and law enforcement, first responder training framework, legislative and technical steps that must be taken, as well as collaborative integration. Successful integration requires collaboration between many entities, right? But these are just a couple I could think of off the top of my head. Cal OES, DOJ, Post, schools, regional centers, advocacy groups, and the policymakers, because at the end of the day, that's who we want to make sure that we're passing legislation and funding for all of this. And last but not least is efforts to prioritize equity, inclusion, protecting our vulnerable populations, and improving response times and reducing adverse outcomes. And this is a really quick snapshot of, so I don't take too much time, of the Manny Alert piece, as well as what we've been doing with the SB 882 Advisory Council. And I'm happy to throw my contact information in the chat if anybody wants to chat a little bit more about it. Or I don't know if we have time for it, but I'm certainly open to some questions as well. And that concludes my presentation.
Oh, thank you. That was so, I mean, it's amazing how much work has been done. So I appreciate you sharing on that, and really look forward to hearing more as you continue down that production. I do want to open up. We do have a minute or two for questions if anybody has anything right now for Astrid. Teresa, I see your hand.
Thank you, Eden. I really just wanted to say thank you, Astrid. I know you've put a tremendous amount of work into this. And kind of thinking through like the Manular Act and then the recommendations on SB 882. I know those are the amount of work and the heavy lift that took on both of those. What can people on this call or other people, stakeholders, advocates, how can people support these efforts?
Absolutely. The more people we have attending the SB 882 Advisory Council meetings is critical, because we do take the recommendations that are either emailed to the staff at the DOJ or the public comment that is made. We do follow up with people who have some really great ideas and invite them to come back. Having each of you provide some sort of input is critical in us making recommendations that are inclusive of all stakeholders. So again, my number's here. I'll also get the link for the SB 882 website so that you can stay up to date. You can look back at past meetings, speakers, materials, and then you can stay up to date with our upcoming meetings in the next year before we finalize
And
everything.
will the final report be public? I know it'll go to the legislature, but once it's public, I think the intent, I know when we were working on it, was that once those recommendations are made, other advocacy organizations can kind of run with some of them, right? Pick up some of the recommendations and use them in their platforms as well. Is that still the plan?
Yep.
Great. We'll look forward to seeing them a tremendous amount of work. Thank you so much. I've been following it closely, and I'm so impressed with the work that's gone into it, the recommendations that are coming out from the council. They're very, very creative, and I think could go a million miles in addressing some of these issues that systemic issues we faced for so long.
Yeah, it's a lot of work that needs to be done. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, right? But like I said before, for me, I just look at it as a patchwork quilt. I can't do it all, as much as I'd like to just hand over all my ideas to the legislature and say, implement this shit. They won't do it. So I just have to take one little piece at a time and get it passed. And then eventually we'll have this beautiful sewn patchwork quilt, and hopefully we'll all be in a better place at some point in time in the future.
Great.
Thanks, Astrid.
Yes. Okay. Seeing no other hands at this time, then thank you, Astrid, very much.
Eden, there are a couple hands. I see Adolphus has his.
Oh, this is why I should not be in charge of.
It's hard to see everything on the screen. I get it.
Okay. Jadolphus.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I've attended a few of the SB 882 Advisory Council meetings, and I've spoke at some of those meetings. I've heard a lot of talk about training, how good the training is, and the effort to create more training. I'm wondering if anything is being considered or what's being considered about how law enforcement could be trained or would be trained to identifying individuals who don't present or who present with invisible disabilities, right? So we can't just automatically look at someone and determine if they have a disability or what kind of disability they might have. So are you able to speak to, or are you able, is that something
Absolutely.
that's being considered? Because I mean, anyone,
Yeah.
I have disabilities,
Mhm.
right?
We're all a little.
But if I don't tell
No.
you, if I don't want you to know, then how are you, or how is a law enforcement officer
Yeah.
able to, I mean, I don't have, an individual developmental disability, but we're talking about AB 882 is to address issues between law enforcement and people with intellectual developmental disabilities and people with mental illness, right? So
Yeah.
if you can't see that a person presents with those disabilities, then how does law enforcement get trained? And how
I
do
got
you
tons of
know that they're
ideas.
actually competent beyond the training space, right?
Mhm.
How do you know that they're competent to actually
Yeah.
practice what they're trained in? That's something that I'm curious about, especially when I hear that the trainings that they've received are top notch. They're great trainings, but yet and still we have issues that warrant SB 882.
Yes. I agree wholeheartedly because my son looks quote unquote normal, but my normal kids give me more headaches than he do. And that's been a concern of mine because he looks like your average kid. He doesn't display any disabilities. There's a lot of invisible disabilities, and there has been conversation to that. And as great as many of these trainings are, that's one of the purposes of us attending the trainings, that some of the subject matter experts attending these trainings to identify some of the gaps. And one that I have said a lot in all of my report backs is that I feel there has to be a hands-on component. They can't take a 40-hour training or a 5-day training and be expected to be able to go out into the community and identify that this kiddo on this screen right here, I don't know where my thing is, has a disability. But if they spent time in maybe our schools, if they spent time in many of the programs, the adult programs, and that be part of a reoccurring education plan. And these are conversations that we're having as recommendations. They would learn to identify better. Because I know as a parent, right, I've been doing this almost 30 years. And as a parent, I can kind of sense because I've lived around it, right? And so the more that they're around people with mental health and developmental disabilities, they'll be able to identify that. And then also going to the many other things that we can do besides training, right? To help them know what they're walking into in advance, or to have alternative response units versus a police officer responding all the time. So there's a lot of things that we can do. And that's why I encourage you to email your recommendations, which you feel is needed more. And so that we can add that into these recommendations. But our recommendations only go as far as a piece of paper if we're not post SB 882 at the legislators' offices, at the Capitol, pushing for more reforms, and just making sure that we're passing laws that hold people accountable and delivering the data that needs to be delivered so that we know what's needed in the future, where the lack is, where the gaps are. So yeah, that's
Thank you. Hey,
what I
Astrid,
feel.
I did see that you put your name and contact information in the chat. So perfect. Thank you. If everybody has access to the chat, then certainly grab that information. I know, talk about I know he's not
baby.
happy. He just woke, his parents were supposed to be back by now, so I apologize. Although I'm okay with it. I see, Andrea, your hand is up. I just want to be mindful of time. We can make it a quick question unless you want to save it for the end, but I know Megan Anderson from the Division of Medicare Medi-Cal Fraud Enforcement is here today, and it is time for that on the agenda. Did you want for a second? Maybe Teresa, can I turn it over to you? I'll be right back.
Sure. Let's go ahead and thank you again, Astrid, for everything, all the information you shared and all the hard work you've done. This is incredible. And I'm looking at our agenda. What is next on our agenda?
We have Megan now.
Okay, let's hand it over to Megan then.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. My name is Megan Anderson. I'm a supervising deputy attorney general with the Department of Justice, Office of the Attorney General. And I work in one of 4 divisions at the Department of Justice in the Office of the Attorney General. And that is the Division of Medi-Cal Fraud and Elder Abuse. I've done a number of presentations recently with some people who I think might be on this Zoom meeting. We did a presentation in Folsom with the Office of the Long-Term Care Ombudsman, which is how I met Eden. I've done a number of APS presentations and also to California Disability Rights or Disability Rights California. So if you have heard me speak before, I apologize for the repeat, but I learn something new every day at this job, and maybe you will learn something new too. I just want to start by saying, first of all, thank you. I came in and I heard kind of the tail end of the conversation you were just having. And as a result, I looked up SB 882 in the Advisory Council. And I want to applaud everybody who's working on that. I have a son with multiple invisible disabilities, and I was really interested in the conversation you were all having. And through my job as a career prosecutor, I obviously have familiarity with law enforcement. And I was sitting here thinking about what it would be like if my son, was stopped or interviewed by the police. He's 8, so we have a little ways to go, but you never know. And I was thinking about what you all were talking about and how changing perspectives is really important, because my son might not make eye contact with a police officer, and that's not because he's guilty of doing something. It's because that's a part of his disability, or the fact that, his language is maybe he wouldn't be able to be understood. And that's not because he's high or on something. It's because he has a significant speech deficit. So it was a really interesting way to start this. So I appreciate all of your work with that. But I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully I figure out how to do that on Zoom and not on Teams. And go through our PowerPoint presentation. Can everybody see this?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So essentially what I'm going to be doing today is giving you an overview of what we do at the Division of Medi-Cal Fraud and Elder Abuse. It's kind of a mouthful, but we really focus on 2 primary areas, one being Medi-Cal fraud and one being elder abuse, as well as abuse of disabled adults. Sometimes we refer to them as dependent adults because that's the verbiage in the California Penal Code, who live and reside in facilities. So we're talking nursing homes, adult residential facilities for the developmentally disabled, or assisted living, kind of runs the gamut. But any sort of long-term care facility is essentially what we do. And again, if you have seen this presentation before, we always do a standard one because it's the state, and every time we do a new presentation, it has to go up the vast hierarchy for approval. So we typically use the same one, but we try to cater it and model it for our audience. So DMFEA, the Division of Medi-Cal Fraud and Elder Abuse, is what is called a Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. So one thing I really love about our office is that we are part of a broader national coalition. So when they started the Medicaid program in the 70s, they realized pretty quickly that they needed some sort of oversight to prevent fraud of this benefits program, because it is, sometimes a green light for people to say, oh, I'm just going to, skim off the trough of the government and no one's going to notice. So they established what are called Medicaid fraud control units, and each state has to have one, or they have to certify that they have no fraud in their state with their state Medicaid program, which no one can do. So every state has an office typically associated with their state attorney general's office, which has the sole purpose of investigating and prosecuting fraud against their state Medicaid program, as well as abuse and neglect in long-term care facilities. And oftentimes, fraud and abuse do not necessarily go hand in hand, but because we have this Medicaid nexus, that is where kind of this dual purpose originated. And of course, I learned something new when I joined the DOJ. I really didn't understand or know much about Medi-Cal, nor did I really understand the differences between Medicaid and Medicare and Medi-Cal. But Medi-Cal is California's Medicaid program. Some states call it just Medicaid. Other states like California have a special name for it. Tennessee, I think, calls theirs 10-Aid, which I think is kind of clever. But each state has their Medicaid fraud control unit, and they work with their state agency that regulates and oversees and implements the Medicaid program in their state. So in California, we work and we partner very closely with the Department of Healthcare Services, because they are the state department that implements and oversees Medicaid as Medi-Cal in California. As a result, because we are established through federal grants as well as federal statute, which establishes every Medicaid fraud control unit, we are 75% federally funded, which is really fantastic when the state is broke. So we only have to rely on 25% from the state coffers, and 75% of our grant is federally funded. In the state of California, we have a significant number of people who are Medicaid beneficiaries, Medi-Cal beneficiaries, including my son. So I am very familiar with the program and the ins and outs of getting recertified every year, as well as the different requirements. So we have close to 15 million Medi-Cal beneficiaries in the state of California, and that can be based on indigency or it can be based on a disability. Many hospitals, healthcare workers, facilities, hospice companies are what we refer to as providers of Medi-Cal services. And those are the folks that we have jurisdiction to investigate and look at for wrongdoing. DMFEA has grown significantly over the past 5 years. Prior to 2021, we were one department within the criminal division of the Office of the Attorney General. But in 2021, they decided, you guys need to be your own division, because not only are you doing both criminal and civil work, you guys are 75% federally funded. Like, it gets a little complicated with the books. So go ahead, be your own division. And since then, we have rapidly grown in many different areas, including new office and regional locations. One condition of our grant is that the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, DMFEA, has to grow as the number of beneficiaries of Medi-Cal increases. So over the past several years, we've had significant increases in the number of individuals who are Medi-Cal beneficiaries, and as a result, we have been required to grow. We've established most recently offices in Redding as well as in Dublin. We have a new office on the way in Bakersfield. So if you're interested in living or moving to Bakersfield, we will be hiring there. But we have a significant number of offices specifically in the Los Angeles area in West Covina, Riverside, Burbank, because obviously we have a huge population in Los Angeles, and we have a lot of providers, a lot of beneficiaries, and as a result, a lot of investigations that occur there. There are, there are hundreds of skilled nursing facilities in Los Angeles as well. That is specifically what my team does. We look at abuse and neglect in facilities. So we are very busy in the Los Angeles area. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that we do really kind of two different things, and first one being fraud of Medi-Cal, as well as abuse and neglect. So I'm going to start with our fraud structure inside. So first and foremost, we always tell people DMFEA does not investigate and prosecute beneficiaries. So we are not looking at individuals who lie about their income in order to qualify for Medi-Cal. We are not interested in doing that. We leave it to the county district attorney's offices if they want to pursue some sort of perjury. And also there are administrative remedies for those sorts of situations in which people can essentially be kicked out of the Medi-Cal program. What we focus on are the individuals, the providers who are defrauding the program. So some examples of that are dentists or doctors or hospice companies, a lot of behavioral health companies, people who provide therapy in a variety of different structures to individuals with disabilities. That is kind of something that is increasing. So we are looking at those providers who are fraudulently billing, and that really happens in two different ways. One, they bill for beneficiaries who are, in fact, either fake beneficiaries or who are fraudulently enrolled in the program. So sometimes you'll see hospice companies sign up a bunch of people for a hospice, and these people live out of state and they have no idea that this company has used their information and enrolled them as hospice beneficiaries and then bill. Another kind of thing that we see or pattern that we see is a service is in fact being provided, but they are billing at a higher rate or an inappropriate rate. So one example of this would be you have individuals in behavioral health therapy, and they are receiving it in, a group setting for a half an hour. But what is being billed is individual therapy for an hour and a half at a higher rate. So those are some of the different schemes or patterns that we see. We also do civil work in this arena as well, because we will get whistleblowers who will submit a claim, basically relating some sort of fraud or mismanagement that they will see. And this can happen on a national level. So we work very closely with our federal partners as well as other state Medicaid fraud control units, because sometimes you're dealing with national companies, for example, CVS. So our civil work, we like to joke that they keep the lights on because they are getting monetary damages and bring in money. We as an organization are recouping federal dollars. So not federal and state dollars. So a lot of people have asked us, are you worried about cuts and that we keep hearing about? But we like to say we bring home the bacon, so you don't want to get rid of us. All right. So the other side of what we do is in the abuse and neglect arena. I mentioned that we do a lot of work in, which is geared towards long-term care facilities. This is what my team specifically does. I am the supervisor for what's called our facilities enforcement team criminal side. So we look at criminal abuse and neglect of individuals who are residents of long-term care facilities. We also have a civil team, which looks specifically at understaffing at skilled nursing facilities, which I'll get to that in a second. But really, essentially, the hallmark of what we are doing is looking at any sort of facility which is a Medi-Cal provider, which is abusing and neglecting residents. And that can take a any sort of form of financial abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, as well as just neglect and things you see like pressure sores or falls or mismanagement of medications, missed medications. So it can really kind of run the gamut. We have kind of 3 bases for what we call our jurisdiction. So because we are grant-based, we do have limits on what we can investigate, and we have a purpose for which we exist, and that is to investigate certain sorts of crimes. So I mentioned that we have jurisdiction into any facility that accepts Medi-Cal. And it doesn't matter if our victim themselves is a Medi-Cal beneficiary, as long as the facility themselves is accepting any form of Medi-Cal dollars, we have jurisdiction to investigate any wrongdoing that happens within their building. However, many assisted living facilities, the vast majority of assisted living facilities or boarding care facilities, are in fact not Medi-Cal providers unless they have a waiver in which to receive Medi-Cal. But the majority of them are not on that waiver program. We still have jurisdiction to investigate wrongdoing in those facilities. And I'm talking about sometimes larger assisted living facilities that can hold 200 people, or your little mom and pop 6-bed, they've converted a house into a boarding care facility. We can also investigate wrongdoing in those facilities as long as there are 2 more unrelated elders or dependent adults who are receiving assistance with substantial assistance with activities of daily living. So a really good example of that is a resident in a 6-bed boarding care is suffering from pressure sores because no one is turning them. This is a very, very, very common scenario that we see. And we get complaints from the Department of Social Services in regards to those sorts of incidents. We partner very closely with the Department of Public Health, which oversees skilled nursing facility and any sort of facility that provides medical care. And that includes congregate living facilities for people who have acute needs, or the Department of Social Services, which oversees residential care facilities, aka assisted living, boarding cares, and I think ARFs. I always forget if ARFs, adult residential facilities, if those are DPH or DSS, but we get complaints related to those as well. Finally, we have what we call our expanded authority, which is this 3rd one in non-institutional settings. And this does on occasion get us into private homes where abuse may be occurring, because normally we wouldn't have jurisdiction there. But if you have, for example, an in-home support services caretaker, let's say elderly mom has her son as her IHSS provider, and that son is then abusing mom, we have jurisdiction to investigate those because Medi-Cal services are being provided in connection with the abuse. They also list here, pediatric dentistry. If you have a Medi-Cal beneficiary who's a child and they are abused during the provision of dentist services or something, we would have jurisdiction to investigate that, but it's definitely more rare. All right, this is some of the people that we have working at DMFEA. DMFEA is very unique as a state agency because we have both our prosecution individuals as well as our investigative individuals working under what we call a vertical prosecution model, which means that the attorneys are involved in the investigation from the time that we receive a complaint from one of our partner agencies like DHCS for fraud, Department of Public Health, Department of Social Services for our abuse end. So I am in the category of deputy attorneys general, but we also have special agents, sworn special agents, many of whom have specific investigative skills and knowledge in the areas that we work in. We also have our support staff of legal analysts, which is our paralegals and legal secretaries. And over here we have our all-important medical professionals. For me, these folks are really, really important because we get so many complaints that involve complex medical issues, particularly when we're looking at neglect. So we have nurses on our team who act in many ways as translators, telling us this is what all of this means. And I was able to stop going to Google every 5 seconds and I can just ask them and they can assist us and they review complaints to determine, should this be opened as an investigation or not? So our medical professionals, including we have an MD, as well as contracted experts, they are really, really an essential part of what we do. One of the nurses on my team has significant experience in dealing with the developmentally disabled. And so she is essential for our cases in which our developmentally disabled folks have been victimized. And she can say, hey, this was not an appropriate action that they were taking. This individual shouldn't have been restrained, etc. And I see a question from Greg.
Greg, you might have to come off mute. Yeah.
I didn't expect to be called out so quickly. Under Penal Code Section 368.5, you and all other state law enforcement agencies have concurrent jurisdiction with local law enforcement agencies. How does that work in practice? Are there the local police departments and sheriff's offices cede everything to you, or how do you work together if you do?
That's a really great question. So it happens in a variety of ways, and it's not always consistent or clear. So a lot of times when you have some sort of significant abuse situation, the local police department is called quickly. Particularly if someone is injured or if someone elopes from their facility, whatever it might be. But sometimes, particularly with smaller jurisdictions, they're kind of like, wait a minute, this is a nursing home, or I don't know what's going on here, or we don't necessarily have the background information on the applicable regulations that apply to this facility or whatever it might be. So we do a lot of these kinds of presentations to educate local law enforcement agency that, hey, we're here and you can contact us. Sometimes it's frustrating because they get the really good cases. Often it happens because they get the first bite at the apple. And sometimes, that is absolutely appropriate. But we do a lot of partnerships, or we'll get referrals from agencies who will say, hey, can you take this? Or the local district attorney passes on it and then they shop it to us. And I've had a very successful prosecution that the local DA's office did not want to take on. And we took it on and we ran with it. So it really happens in a variety of ways.
Can I ask one more question while I'm at it?
Sure.
Do you enforce the mandated reporting laws, people failing to report or people interfering with mandated reporters reporting?
We do. We used to do it a lot more. And the reason why we've slowed down in that area is because the failure to report law is put on the list of crimes that is eligible for diversion. So what that means is that when a case is filed, the defense attorney or the defendant can go to the judge and make a motion saying, hey, my offense that I'm being charged with is eligible for diversion, which means the judge says, okay, we're going to take a pause on this. And if you don't get in trouble for the next year or whatever, or sometimes they'll add, if you complete this class or whatever it is, we're going to dismiss your case. So what we were finding is that in a lot of our cases, we were, putting forth a lot of resources to investigate, and then the cases go nowhere and they just end up being dismissed, which is frustrating when you've put in a lot of time and effort. So we have gotten more discerning about which failure to report cases we are pursuing. Obviously, if you get an administrator at a nursing home who's not reporting a sexual assault, that's something that we are interested in looking at because that needs to never happen again. But it really kind of depends on the case, and we just have to be more mindful of the resources because they're going nowhere. We have tried to do a legislative fix where we have tried to take failure to report off of that list of diversion eligible offenses because we do think they're important and they're a big deal. But we haven't had any luck with that so far, but we're going to keep trying.
How about interfering with or with a mandated reporter, supervisor or the management someplace, or anyone prevents them from tries to prevent
Yeah,
them from
I
playing,
haven't
which does happen.
Yeah, I have no doubt. I have not seen a fact pattern like that, but I would be interested to see that because that in many ways is even worse. That's could
Yeah.
almost be like dissuading a witness, which is a whole other fun charge, which is not diversion eligible. So if something like that came up, we could get creative.
Thank you.
Mhm. So, again, you can all see this slide. You can see what's on it. I want to give a shout out though to our investigative auditors because they are very, very helpful, not only in our fraud cases, but also with our financial abuse cases. We work closely with our auditors and essentially they are forensic accountants in-house and they are well versed in going through bank records and all of that fun stuff that many of the lawyers will do anything they can to avoid. I was in that camp and I have had my mind changed, but I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so again, kind of piggybacking off the last slide, we have here different areas that we specialize in and we investigate. So I mentioned, hospice fraud earlier. Los Angeles is the nationwide hotbed for hospice fraud. It's just, yeah, they're everywhere. The hospice companies are everywhere. There's a large population. So we are swimming in hospice cases, as are the regional federal offices in that area. It's something that we have had to put a lot of resources into. But again, it's very important work because of the harm that can happen when you have someone who is put on hospice inappropriately. And oftentimes we will see that go hand in hand with harm, because you will have someone who is inappropriately put on hospice and then something happens to them and they are not given appropriate treatment because the doctors are saying, well, you're on hospice. So we're not going to, do X, Y, and Z. And so they're not getting the medical treatment that they need. Failure report is on here. I've already talked about that. One thing that I really like to talk about too is our elder or dependent adult charging strategies with exclusion. This is really important because if you are convicted of a 368 elder abuse charge, we report it. And we report it to the Department of Healthcare Services as well as the Office of the Inspector General. And you are put on a list. And you cannot work in a facility or for a beneficiary that is a Medi-Cal provider or beneficiary. So what we have found is that when we do get those convictions, it gets bad actors out of the business, at least for, a few years, which is great because we know they're an abuser. We don't want them going back into a different nursing facility or a different assisted living facility. We want them out of the game. And that really helps us do that. It's a good tool in our toolbox. Additionally, we have our SNF staffing ratio analysis. This is kind of a growing area of our litigation, and the facilities enforcement team civil side is very much focused on this. And what it looks like is we have nursing homes who have to meet state minimum staffing levels for RNs as well as CNNs, our certified nursing assistants. They have to provide a certain number of hours of that level of care every day for every resident or patient. And vast majority of facilities do not meet these requirements. So we are going after them for doing that. And by going after them, I mean we're suing them or we're investigating them and looking at the harm that results from them understaffing, chronically and systemically, deliberately understaffing their facilities. And the reason why that happens is, one, staffing is expensive. So it's a way for them to save money and make money. And many of these for-profit chains are owned by multi-millionaires, and they are making their money off of understaffing their facilities. And as a result of their understaffing, you see an increase in patient harm in the form of falls and missed medication, people not being turned, so they're developing pressure sores, and then they get sepsis, and then they go to the hospital and they die. And this is a pattern that we see over and over and over again, particularly with our elderly individuals who are bedbound And so it's a big problem in the nursing home arena, and we are working very hard to call it out and bring more attention to it. So it's something that my team does. I'm not directly involved in, other than I'm their big cheerleader. All right. So we have, as a result of being a Medicaid fraud control unit, we have what we call our inspection authority, and it's based both in the federal codes as well as the state codes, and it allows us to go in and inspect the records of any sort of Medi-Cal provider. So what this is essentially is it's telling people, hey, you were signing up to be a Medi-Cal provider, and we put it in their agreement. As a condition of you receiving taxpayer dollars in the form of Medi-Cal billing, you have to open up your books and show us that you are using these taxpayer dollars legitimately. And it's a really great tool for us to be able to go in and look at their books. It also includes medical records. If you're looking at a facility that provides any sort of medical care, they have to open up their patient files to us. And we utilize those regularly in both our fraud and abuse cases. I put in here Operation Guardian and Operation Safe. I kind of liked Operation Guardian better, but they changed it after the COVID. And this is a program where we do surprise inspections in nursing homes. We get a complaint involving some sort of alleged criminal conduct, and we go in and we surprise them, and they hate it. And we go in and we tell them we're here to look at this complaint, and we walk around, and it's we believe a good deterrent. It's also a good way for us to educate our staff on how a nursing home operates. And we investigate cases that way as well. And this is one of the government code sections, the main one, that allows us and gives us this authority to do these inspections. All right, I have a number of case examples that I'm going to go through quickly. This is an example I mentioned specifically, cases that can occur with that are financial cases and where we're using our auditors. I learned, this was a case that I prosecuted, I learned to love financial abuse cases from this experience. I love bank records. You know, I always used to avoid voluminous records, particularly anything that involved math. I avoided them when I was a deputy district attorney. But I love them now because bank records don't get on the witness stand and lie, which is a nice perk. But also it's just an illustration of theft. It's theft on a page. And I really love that. But this was a case, a very sad case of a woman who had Huntington's disease and was disabled, living in a boarding care. And her daughter was her power of attorney and cleaned her out. And this woman's life savings, she had 3 other children who eventually figured out what was going on, but this woman's life savings were stolen from her under the guise of her daughter taking care of her as her power of attorney. And it caused a lot of stress at the end of the victim's life because she knew she was going to need money, and the money was earmarked for her care, which can be very expensive. And, now she was put in a position of, oh my gosh, I don't have any money. So this case, she was sentenced to 3 years state prison. She's out right now because we're almost done with the appeal, and hopefully it will be upheld. But she stole over $500,000 from her mother, who wasn't a wealthy person. She just was a saver and saved her whole life. She was a nurse and a missionary at one point, saved for many, many years, and then did sell her house when she became a widow, and earmarked the money to be used for her care. So very sad case. This is another one where we have, this is out of the Bay Area in San Mateo County. This is a case that we have where we had a licensed vocational nurse essentially tell the staff when they found the victim on the ground, it's just a mini stroke, put him to bed. But it wasn't just a mini stroke, it was a bigger stroke. And he ended up going to the hospital eventually. Took hours and hours for this guy to finally say, let's call 911, let's call his doctor. And by that time it was too late, and he went to the hospital and passed away. But it was just a refusal to even take the minimal precautions and to even call 911. And what also kills me about these kinds of cases is these people are being paid a lot of money to provide care that they just don't even want to provide. This is another big case that we have that's been filed in Monterey County. This was a rape case involving a CNA in a nursing home. This case was the result of a referral by the long-term care ombudsman. So I shout out to them. And this was another case, going back to the question earlier, where we were brought in, we were notified by the ombudsman, but the local police department was already involved. But after about a year, the detective who was assigned to the case retired and said, "Can you guys take this?" And we said, "Absolutely." And we took it, and there's a DNA hit, and which is obviously very, very helpful. So we're keeping our fingers crossed for this case. This is a very common scenario that we see as well. We have an owner of a 6-bed RCFE down in San Diego County who just didn't hire enough staff, deliberate understaffing, particularly at night, and just left people to languish. And they did, and they developed pressure sores, which got infected from urine and feces, which led to sepsis and malnutrition and just really awful neglect. We also see these sorts of cases sometimes in other scenarios, not necessarily involving the elderly, but also sometimes with our disabled adults. Let's see here. Okay, so we get referrals. I mentioned the Lumby case came from a referral from the long-term care ombudsman. We get referrals from all sorts of people. We get a lot of referrals from individuals who go onto our website and or call us and say, "This is what's happening with my loved one," or "I think that there's this fraud situation happening," whatever the case may be. We do get referrals from local law enforcement, sometimes district attorney's office, who maybe don't have a specialized elder abuse or fraud unit. A lot of social workers out of hospitals who will say, "This person came in clearly neglected from this facility. You need to look into this." Sometimes we get them from conservators or private attorneys. So the case I mentioned, the financial abuse case that I did, that was referred to us from a probate attorney who got involved and was retained by the family and then referred it to us. We do get some cases. Some of my favorite witnesses are first responders, EMTs, folks like that. We do get sort of similar referrals where they say, "Hey, I keep going out to this facility all the time. I'm getting calls. This is a problematic facility. Here's what's going on. Investigate them." We do get cases referred to us from APS. I wish we got more cases from APS, but I also understand that APS works very closely with their county partners, including the local law enforcement agencies, like the sheriff's office or the police department, and the district attorney, particularly if there is an assigned elder abuse district attorney. So, but I feel like APS, much like the ombudsman, are boots on the ground. And they actually see what is happening, particularly in facilities for the ombudsman. They see a lot of what is happening. So, yeah, I really value those referrals. And finally, our licensing authorities, I've mentioned CDPH, DSS, as well as our Department of Healthcare Services. They're a primary partner on our fraud end. This is where you can send complaints and referrals. I also routinely, and I will put it in the chat, give out my email address because people tell me I'm crazy. I'm not. But particularly if it falls in abuse and neglect in a long-term care facility, I'd like, and there's a really powerful one or a serious one, I want to find out about it early and quickly. So you can do that. I'll give you my email. We have our QR code up, but this is some of our ways to get a hold of us and submit a complaint. All right. People always ask me, how am I going to get my complaint looked at? And I tell them, earlier the better, and the more information you include, the better. So One thing that can be difficult and challenging is we get an allegation of financial abuse, but we don't know how much money is involved. We get a lot of financial abuse allegations. So we do have to pick and choose, and having knowledge of the amount involved is really important. Or if there's photographs, or if there's another witness who saw something happen, those are really important details to include and that we are looking for, and increases the likelihood that your complaint will be investigated. All right, time for questions. And I'm happy to answer anything, and then I will be sure to put my information in the chat.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, this is where I'll call on anybody who's got a hand up. If you see it, let me know.
There's one in the chat as well.
Okay.
If you can see that, Megan.
When is it appropriate to refer to the AG's office versus the local DA? So I think so a referral to us is most appropriate when it is, I'm going to stop sharing. When it is something that is in our jurisdiction. So I mentioned abuse and neglect in facilities, whether there are 2 or more individuals who are receiving substantial assistance with ADLs, obviously provider fraud. It just really kind of depends. I love getting cases, but I understand that you're going to have a faster response if you call 911. But you can always refer to both, because sometimes we'll get referrals and then we just check in and what we call it deconflict with our local partners. And sometimes some of them will be like, yeah, this is sitting here and we have no idea what to do with it. Can you take it? And we do. So I would recommend to refer to both if you want to. But obviously, we love good cases, so we want to see those too.
Greg, did you have another question?
Sure. Do you watch out for hate crimes based on the disability, particularly characteristic of disability? There are virtually no prosecutions for that in California, despite the fact that the bias motivation, which is what turns a crime into a hate crime, can include all kinds of things for which there's evidence of bias against the person because of their disability.
Yeah. I haven't seen something specifically come through as a hate crime alone. And I can tell you from when I was a deputy district attorney, hate crimes were not often prosecuted because the statutory language can be difficult to prove. Because you have certain issues with things like free speech. But that being said, what I have seen is where a hate crime also comes in with some sort of an abuse allegation. So you have, for example, someone who is targeted and abused or physically assaulted or whatever it may be because of their protected class. So you can see it. So this is one thing I love about criminal prosecution is you can get creative and you can look at different ways of charging something. And I have seen that happen where you have the abuse crime going hand in hand with hate crime allegation. And I think that a hate crime can also be added as an enhancement to certain crimes.
Any crimes.
Yeah. So there's just different ways that you can sort of play around with it. And that's where the context I've seen that in.
Great. And Teresa, yes. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, she was answering as I was asking. So thank you. Yeah, I was curious about the enhancement piece because I know we've really argued strongly for that in the past to get, any kind of enhancement on some of those criminal activities.
Right. And you can kind of think of the scenarios where that might happen. So we have it's a very disturbing case where individuals who are developmentally disabled, intellectually disabled, kind of runs the gamut, live in a group home setting, and the caretaker is abusive, right? And in some cases, to the point where like doing really awful things that are designed to shame, hurt, just mentally just screw with the people, the victims. And I could see it absolutely applying to a scenario like that, where you see someone in many ways who is just forced to undergo this really horrible physical and mental anguish, which is being inflicted on them because they are disabled. So unfortunately, we see those sorts of cases come through every now and then, where you have, the caretakers they make the residents do something and then they film it. It's just awful. Or like we had a case, it was kind of like they set up a fight club. I don't know why it went blurry all of a sudden, but let's try this real quick. Sometimes my camera does that. So we see those scenarios, and that's where hate crime would come in.
Okay. Anything else from anybody else? All right. Not seeing any hands. I don't think anyways. I've said that before and was wrong. So, okay. Megan, yes, this is not the first time I've heard this presentation, but again, I learn something every time I do hear it. And that is one of our goals of this group, is to continue to learn and hear what others are doing and how we can be most effective together. And that's certainly being aware of what other things or what other folks are doing. Thank you for all the work you do. I know you probably face all sorts of gruesome stories and situations, and I hope I don't know. We are out here too, fighting for what you're doing and making sure that we can prevent any kind of abuse as soon as it starts, to report it when it's possible. And thank you for continuing to hear us and take those cases and get them across those prosecution lines, because that certainly, some of those people need to definitely be taken out of the system and off of the streets. So thank you. Anybody else? It looks like Jadolphus may have raised his hand. So do you have a comment or question before we move?
Yes, I have a question. I'm curious, what is it that we can do to encourage or to educate or inform family members or people who work in facilities to report to DOJ when there is when they have witnessed
Right.
being committed?
So kind of to go back to what I said earlier, we have reporting is essential. Reporting is absolutely key, particularly, if you are, let's say you're someone who works in a facility and you see abuse, you got to report it. But it's not going to be enough to just report it to the administrator or something like that. That's not going to get the job done. So if you see something that is really bad, or you're a family member and you see something that is disturbing, I would encourage people to refer it, not just internally, but to refer it to the DOJ. And then also to include as many details as possible to ensure that it's going to get investigated. We get a lot of referrals from the Department of Public Health that are like 2 sentences, 3 sentences. And it's hard to open. I mean, that's like bare bones information. So what I tell individuals, as well as other folks like you all, is include the details, because we're looking at it to look at a number of different things. If it's a physical abuse complaint, is there another witness? Because the reality is, a lot of the times our victims aren't going to be able to testify. So how do you explain what happened if you don't have another witness besides your bedbound, victim who may or may not have dementia, for example? So we are looking for information about other witnesses. What's that other witness's name? What's their phone number? Anonymous complaints are really hard, because right from the get, who do we contact? We don't know who to contact. So we get a lot of anonymous complaints, and those can be challenging. So what I would do if I was in your shoes and you are talking to families and other, employees is report and report well. Include those important details that are going to make it increase the likelihood that it's going to be looked at. That'd be my recommendation.
Report and report well. I think I'll say that from now on.
I just came up with that right there.
Report and report well. I love it. Very, very nice. Thank you very much for joining us today. As always, you're welcome to come back. You're welcome to stay on the line. I know you're a busy person, so feel free to drop off if you need to. Thank you very much. I think this presentation was certainly needed. We haven't heard from DMFEA in a while, and it's just nice to have you join the group today. So we look forward to seeing you again. And I see a lot of applause, so it looks like I am not alone in that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eden, for having me. I appreciate
Yes,
it.
definitely. With that, Priscilla, thank you for hanging in there. I'm going to turn it over to you. So for your updates.
Thank you, Eden. Let me get my slides. Are you guys seeing the right screen, or are you seeing? Oh, you're
I'm
not
seeing like
anything.
presentation mode or like presenter mode.
Okay, let me swap displays. Better?
Better.
All right. Tyler, how much time do I have? I know we're supposed to have another person after me.
Yeah, it's just a legislative update, so just go through your things. You're good.
Okay, I'll try and go through
Yeah.
quickly so that we have
Yeah,
some time at
thanks.
the end. But thanks. So hi folks, Priscilla Clausen. I work for Valor US, which is California's Anti-Sexual Violence Coalition, and I am sharing today about our project called CA Leads. And CA Leads is California Advocates Leading in Engagement, Accessibility, and Developmental Disability Services. Our friend Teresa Anderson here was one of the original members of our lovely collaboration when she was with the ARC of California and helped us start things out for the first couple years. So give a shout out to Teresa for all her hard work. Our current team right now includes our Valor's Director of Prevention, Ashley Klein Jimenez, the ARC of California's Executive Director, Jordan Lindsay, and Client Advocate Elizabeth Grigsby, or Liz. Some of you may know Liz. So I just want to share about our project. We have been doing work together as a collaboration between the ARC of California and Valor for 6 years now. We are waiting with bated breath to find out if we are going to receive funding to continue for another 3 years. The initial phase of our grant was really a collaboration building effort. So we spent a long time working together as two organizations to figure out how we could join forces to make sure that sexual assault services for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities was accessible and known about by either organizations on either side of the aisle, and that we were no longer operating in silos. So we spent about a year working on a collaboration charter just to figure out like all the nitty-gritty, all the things that we could create together, like a mission statement, our values, our vision. We collaborated on like what our time commitments would be for each member of the group, really like making sure that we had a decision-making process going forward. And the grant that we worked on was through the Office on Violence Against Women Disability Grant. And I believe there's someone here from Weave today who is also working on a grant under that program. But our specific grant is sexual assault survivors with developmental disabilities. So part of that grant has specific phases for the first 3 years of the program, and that's what you're seeing on the screen. So our needs assessment, we really went out into the community and talked to different people from each side of the organizations. So like for Valor, we talked to different rape crisis centers in the state. We talked to survivor advocates. We talked to executive directors of rape crisis centers. We talked to survivors with disabilities. We talked to DSPs. So we really made sure that we figured out like what we wanted to know from people and then went into the community and asked them. And then because of that, we made a report that was our findings report and a strategic plan, basically saying like, this is what we found out from all these interviews, and this is how we think that we can help these groups of people to make supports and services for survivors with intellectual and developmental disabilities better and more accessible. And then for implementation, that's where we took all of the plans for what we were going to create and we rolled them out into the community. So that's what I'm going to share some of that with you. Part of what we created was a series of trainings. So survivors with IDD providing appropriate support and advocacy. This was a 2-part training series for rape crisis centers that really introduced them to working with people with disabilities, because what we found is that they really didn't have any experience unless they had someone in their family or, you know, like knew someone personally with a disability. They didn't have the experience. And so oftentimes when people with disabilities would call for support, they would be like, are we supposed to do that? I've never had this happen before. I've heard of the regional center. Maybe they can help you. So they weren't really supporting survivors in the way that they should be. In the second phase of our grant, we added on to that training with a training earlier this year that was increasing access and implementing accommodations. And this session was specifically about how to improve accommodations at rape crisis centers and at sexual assault forensic nursing stations, so that when we did reach out to survivors with disabilities and we did begin to serve them, we would have accessible services physically and in terms of all a variety of their other needs. We also created a number of policies and procedures for rape crisis centers. This one that you're seeing on the screen, and I'll drop the links for these in the chat. And I'm going to have a QR code at the end too that y'all can capture to get all of our products, or you can just go to Valor's website, which is valor.us, and type in CA Leads, and we have our own page with all of our stuff on it. But this report was specifically about helping employees at rape crisis centers and volunteers navigate between confidentiality and mandated reporting, because we know that the majority of people that work with folks with developmental disabilities are mandated reporters. But as rape crisis center employees, our number one value is being able to maintain confidentiality. So sometimes there are people who work at rape crisis centers who are not able to maintain confidentiality, and that can be really confusing for people if they're mandated reporters. So navigating that process, making sure that staff and volunteers know who is and who isn't a mandated reporter, who can keep that confidentiality legally, and who is legally required to report. So that was a really difficult turning point for a lot of rape crisis centers, is like knowing what their responsibilities are. Then we have a model accommodations policy that really just helps folks know what accommodations exist and how to implement them in their rape crisis centers and also their nursing sites. Then we have a sample intake form. So one of the things that we really focused on in our project was asking about accommodations for everyone. So not just assuming that accommodations are only for people with disabilities or only for people that we assume have disabilities or only people that have visible disabilities, but that accommodations can help anyone. And so we shouldn't be asking people if they have a disability, right? That's against the ADA, but we can ask if people need accommodations or need support. And we also need to be prepared for if somebody does disclose a disability, what that may mean to our reporting. So rather than going into a conversation about disability at all, we want to encourage folks to Sorry, my computer was frozen. We want to encourage all of our providers to ask if people need accommodations. So we created this guide, and then also here's a quick look at our sample intake form. So this is basically just a cover sheet that rape crisis centers can use to include with all of their paperwork, and it has directions about using plain language and then some of the things that you can ask people, because we know that not only does plain language help people with disabilities, but it can help people who are English language learners. It can help people who are having to deal with trauma, which survivors are, right? So we want to be helpful in all of these ways. And then we know that some people may not have disabilities, but they might benefit from having fidget items or not having overhead lighting. So all of these things can help everyone, including people with disabilities. So we really want to like normalize it and make sure that we're offering these to everyone. Am I talking too fast? Is anyone having a difficult time? Okay. Unmute and let me know if I need to slow down. Okay, and then we have a series of trainings for disability service providers. So our initial training was a two-part series, just like the ones for rape crisis centers, but this one was specifically for anybody who works in disability service provision. So DSPs, it could be for transportation, it could be people who are job coaches, really anyone who works in the field. And this was about how to work with survivors. And so it really informs people about the risk that exists in the community and why the risk exists. So kind of building in some protective factors for folks, making sure that we are encouraging autonomy in everyday life, not just surrounding sexuality. Because if we help people have a voice and say what they want and what they don't want in life, then the chances are that when they're assaulted, they'll be able to say, no, I don't want this. They'll be able to report it to someone, and they won't feel like, they have to listen to someone because they're in charge of them, which is something that happens a lot that we see with survivors. Then our second training that came out earlier this year was about that mandated reporting process, but how to do it in a trauma-informed way. So what I saw a lot in my work in the community as a disability service worker for almost 10 years was that a lot of people reported without telling the individual they were making a report. So someone would disclose to them and they would say, oh my God, they told me this and I have to tell about it, but I don't want them to be mad at me. I have to see them every day. They're going to give me an attitude. They're going to tell me, like, I told you that in confidence. I told you it was a secret. And I just don't want to, deal with that. But it's the law, so I'm going to do it. So this training is specifically about approaching that process with care and trying to reinstill a sense of autonomy in that survivor. So one thing that we know about sexual assault is that it really takes away people's choices, and it makes them feel like they don't have a voice. So in the reporting process, that can then happen as well, right? The person doesn't have a choice in whether or not something's reported. So we want to really approach it in a way that involves the survivor and make sure that we're including them and their opinions and what they want as much as we can. So letting them know, like, I have to write this report, but would you like me to read it to you? And you can tell me, if there's changes that I need to make, if I got it right, if I got it wrong. Would you like to sit in the room with me while I call? Would you like to report it yourself? All those things that we can do to help that survivor regain a sense of autonomy and let them know that, you're still involved in the decision-making process. This isn't something that we're then taking away from you again. Then we have some policies and procedures to back up these processes. So this is a written guide about the same thing. And then we have a plain language guide, because what we also found in our research was that a lot of folks didn't know what mandated reporting was. A lot of folks using services may not know that, hey, your transportation driver is a mandated reporter, your doctor is a mandated reporter, like your job coach is a mandated reporter. Or maybe they know that, but they don't know what that means. So this is a plain language guide that really goes through all the aspects of mandated reporting and what that means. It tells you who in your life may be a mandated reporter. When they need to report things, what they need to report about, how they report, what the reporting process might look like. And it really kind of explains all those different things that people may not be familiar with. So having this handy for people when we first begin to work with them so that they know from the onset, like, hey, you're surrounded by mandated reporters. If you need their help, this is who you can go to. But also, if you want to make a decision about what kind of supports and services you're going to get, this is who may not be able to control all of those things. And so that leads me to my next resource, which is one that I'm really proud of. We have a client advocacy group that works together to create this material. It's an outreach brochure. What we found when talking to survivors was that they really wanted to get the information firsthand without having to worry that if they requested this information, it would then trigger a mandated report. So really knowing like there's someone out there who I can go to talk to about my options before making any decisions was something that was really helpful for people. So we created this outreach material that rape crisis centers can download, customize with their individual information, or disability service providers can download it and provide it to clients like during their IPPs or their quarterly meetings or whatnot, if they're curious about getting supports and services. Maybe you know someone has a history of sexual violence and they might be interested in receiving some counseling services, but they haven't wanted to talk to you about it. So this is something that you can give to them. And this is the front and the back of the brochure. Again, the back is customizable and it has space for a QR code on the inside, this little space. Can you see my cursor? Yeah, okay. So that little space is for a QR code. But our client advisory group really went through and like formulated this specific language. We picked out all these icons together. We chose the photos on the front. We chose the color scheme. We kind of did the icons without any context. Like, what do you think of when you see this icon? What does it mean? Because we know that not everybody who picks up this brochure is going to be able to read. But that doesn't mean they don't know how to use a QR code, right? A lot of folks are very savvy with technology. So they may be able to punch in a phone number and they may see these icons and say like, I think I know what this is about. I'm going to punch in this phone number and see if I can get some help. So this brochure we felt like was really a good way to get some direct contact with the community without having that barrier of having survivors get the buy-in, because we know in the community also, right, that people tend to assume people with disabilities are lying or that they don't understand quite what has happened or what is true, or maybe they're confused about something that happened in the past and they're thinking it happened now. So this is really a way for survivors to connect directly with services without having to make sure that the person they're disclosing to believes them before they reach the services and supports. And then lastly, here's the QR code with all of our information on it, and a resource guide as well that really has a lot of different resources for rape crisis centers, disability service providers, families, also forensic nursing exams. If you've ever had to go to a forensic nursing exam with someone, it's kind of difficult to explain. So there's some picture guides in there, a lot of really great materials, and then also stuff, of course, for self-advocates that they can access on their own. So I will wrap it up there. Does anybody have any questions?
I did see
Great.
a request in the chat that to this we will put the if we have the links, we can get them out to the attendees. Great. And then it looks like Greg, you have your hand up.
Yes. Just in the last couple of weeks, we've started working on a bill concerning what could turn into a bill concerning mandated reporting. We've been trying to make sure it doesn't increase the number of mandated reporters because of the concerns about sexual assault. But I'd like to run it past you. Can you put your address in the chat so I can send it to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.
We don't have a public policy person right now. We actually just lost them to the Domestic Violence Coalition. But we definitely have staff that can look it over and from a more like legal perspective.
Thank you.
I just wanted to give real quick, thanks Priscilla, first of all, for doing that. I know on our team really quick, Julie has to go to another meeting in 3 minutes. So I just wanted her to pop on real quick, and if she can provide anything in that short amount of time. I know we really go through this, but Julie, sorry.
Yeah, I don't think I am going to be able to give anything in that very short amount of time, but great to meet you guys. Again, I'm Julie Sherman, Director of Public Policy for the ARC of California. I do look forward to being in contact with all of you guys and getting more involved in this coalition. I did have a few legislative updates, but I think since we're at time, I can probably go ahead and do those next time. I do have to jump on to a legislative lobbying meeting at 3 p.m., so I do not want to be late for that. But this has been fantastic. I've learned a lot, some really great presentations here. So thank you, everyone.
I'll be sending out, she has some updates too that I'll be sending out after this from Julie's perspective. Sorry to pop in.
And then Tyler, I put the link in the chat for the CA Leads page. If you scroll down, you'll see all the resources like web conferences and publications. And then the links for each individual thing are in the slideshow that I sent you. I don't know if you want to send out all the links, but they're all on that CA Leads page. So that should be good enough.
Okay, that takes us to 2:58. It looks like some people are dropping off. Yes, this was a lot of agenda items in a very short amount of time, as it turns out. So I do offer my sincerest apologies to both Julie and Patrick Smith from the California Commission on Aging. If we can have you back as our reoccurring legislative, I know we're kind of in this, gearing up for the new season, and there's certainly some things that are taking effect on January 1, and certainly some bills from last year that'll be moving forward again this coming year. So Patrick, I'm not sure if you're there, if it's okay to move you to next meeting, or if there's something that needs to be announced right now. There we are.
No, nothing pressing right now. I was just going to give a couple of bills that we were following the last year that went through, but it can wait,
Well, I'm very sorry. Sorry.
No.
I don't know how much more I can apologize, because I really do appreciate somebody who can facilitate and keep the meetings on time, and I did not do that for you folks today. So I will step back and do better next time. Have a happy holiday season, everybody. Take this time because, throughout this kind of meeting, we've heard over and over again, we do deal with some pretty ugly stuff, and we're doing such great work to combat the ugly stuff. And I just want to make sure that that from the bottom of our hearts, the planning committee, and certainly not to speak for everybody on this call, but I do feel like the more we attend these meetings, the closer we get and the more we know about each other. And I just hope that you all take a minute to appreciate the season and enjoy some fresh air and the lights and the trees and everything else. So thank you. Yes, thank you, Priscilla. Absolutely. I look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. And unless there's any final comments or questions or announcements, we can sign off for the month. Happy holidays, definitely. Okay.
Thanks all for coming.
Definitely. Thank you.
Bye.